So there's like a giant community resource that lists the art on every card. This one just says Javier Pena, so I think it's custom. I'm going to go with that. If I'm wrong, I'll tell someone to leave a comment or whatever. Leave a comment down below. I don't read those. I don't care. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. I read them
Leave
all.
that part in.
This is all gets cut. Welcome to Winning Hand, the podcast about Marvel Champions, one card at a time. I am your host, Boomguy, and I'm here today with Keiko.
It is I.
Who we all know, and special guest, Lethus.
Hey, how's it going?
Welcome, Lethus. You are new, first time on the podcast. We are happy to have you here.
Yes, you have just been born. Congratulations.
You did not exist prior to this, but now we have birthed you into the world. So you're welcome, world, and you're welcome, Lethus.
My two new dads.
Yeah. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, please, listen all the way through. And if you like it, leave a 5-star review and a rating. That super helps, or subscribe on whatever place you're listening to this on. And if you're a returning listener, I hope you've already taken the 30 seconds to leave a review. It helps us a lot. Thank you. That's the last time I'll say it.
And even if you don't like it, leave a 5-star review.
Yeah, but if you don't like it, I hope you have something better to do with your life. Go enjoy yourself.
Yeah, leave the 5-star and then get out.
Yeah, and then move on. So, all right, Lethus, this is the first time here on the podcast for you. And when we have people come on, and for the first time they are on the pod, we like to ask them a few questions.
Okay.
So if you would not mind, and if you would humor us, let's go through a few quick ones.
Yeah, let's do it.
So first of all, why don't you tell us, when did you get into the game? At what point? And kind of what's been your journey with the game so far?
Oh, yeah. So I played the game when the core set came out, or shortly thereafter, and didn't understand it. I played through not understanding that you had to switch to stage 2 after defeating stage 1. So I played 4 times with Spider-Man, and I'm like, I'm winning every game by turn 3. I don't understand. So it didn't make sense to me. I shelved it, didn't touch it for a year. And I'm not sure exactly when I came back in. I think it was around the time Thor came out. And I was like, I've got to be missing something. I figured it out and been in love with the game ever since. I've been playing constantly since that point.
Nice. So quick hitters here. What's your favorite aspect?
Justice. Absolutely justice.
What's your favorite hero?
Not to be too Cult of the New, but I've been waiting for X-23 for so long. She just automatically wins right now. I absolutely love the character. She's my favorite character in all of Marvel.
I mean, I think it's safe to say to the internet that I know you from the local game group, so we know each other IRL, as the kids say these days. And I know you're excited about X-23 beyond the hero pack. You genuinely, like you mentioned, you like the character, right?
Yeah, she's phenomenal. She's my heart.
Well, awesome. We'll have to have you back when we talk about X-23.
Oh, for sure.
What's your favorite villain?
I mean, the one I play against the most is probably Mutagen Formula. It gets pretty kind of vanilla, but it's a good testing villain. I think the coolest scenario is probably what is called Light at the End, where you fight the Sinister Six. Sinister Motives. That's just a really thematically cool one. I like the idea that no matter how many times you knock them down, you have to escape. You can't just KO them, even though you can escape faster by KOing them, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, but you can't win by defeating the villain like you can normally.
Yeah, the goal is not to knock them out. The goal is to get out alive, and that felt really cool.
Yeah, when they play with the theme of the battlefield, like when we talked about Kang before too.
Yeah. And I think, isn't Juggernaut the inverse of that? You can't lose by scheming, right? You can only lose to him.
Yeah. You've got to commit to the stand-up fight. You can't run.
Yeah, because when the scheme fills up, right, it just, something happens. I think it gives him a token or something like that and then empties out, right?
There's a few things that happen, but the big one is that he hits you really hard, no matter whether you're in hero or alter ego.
Well, so then there's a question, before we move on to the last question I have for you. Now that I'm thinking about it, what happens when Deadpool fights Juggernaut and you can't lose by scheme and he can't lose by dying? What happens?
Deadpool can't lose by dying in hero form. He can die in alter ego.
Which was actually something I was going to point out a little bit too.
A
little sneak peek into my hero I'm going to be talking about.
All right. Well, all right. I won't go any further then. But okay. And then the last question is, what is your kind of primary player count, and what's your player count distribution, like breakdown?
Yeah, I do play a lot of solo. I play a fair amount of two-player, and then when I do get to come out to play with the local group, that's usually 3 and 4. But it's probably like a descending line. Like I play solo the most, two-player next, and then third, then fourth.
What's your favorite player count?
I think 3.
Okay.
2 is the kind of the best rhythm. Like me and the person I play with, two-player, we play a lot, so we kind of have the same rhythm. We know how to get through things pretty quick. There's not a lot of downtime. Three-player, I feel like mixes things up enough. Where, like you don't have total control of everything. There's enough variables at play that it's really exciting. Four players can do that too, but also there's a lot of calculations to do and stopping to think and plan out people's turns and yeah.
Yeah, it's I agree. I think we've talked about it on the pod before. I think 4 players, a little too long for me, for my tastes, for the most part.
Yeah, it's about a matter of time for 4 players.
Yeah, I think 2 and 3, I think, is kind of where I also prefer to play. Do you play one? Do you play two-handed, or do you play true solo?
Mostly true solo. For me, playing games, like I get in the headspace of a given character. Trying to play two-handed just kind of isn't fun for me because it takes me out of that immersion of being this character when I have to jump back and forth between two of them.
Yeah, it's tough when I play solo. I like the how do I say this? I like the game better at more players, so I prefer it at 2, but I'm
Yeah,
enjoying myself better with only 1. Like, so there's this weird space of like I like the interactions between the heroes, so I like having 2, but it's just more fun for me when I'm doing 1 because I only have to track one thing, like tracking different hands and what I'm going to play next turn and this turn. It just gets a little much for the brain.
yeah. Like early on, I there was a point where I was really tempted to play more two-handed when there weren't so many heroes and combinations, but now there's so many that I can just jump to another one if I get bored.
Yeah, and also the heroes have gotten more complex, so mixing them up, it's one thing if you have Captain America and I don't know, Hulk or something. They're both fairly straightforward, but when you're talking about Domino and Psylocke, playing those
Yeah.
two together, I think my brain might just melt out of my ears.
Yeah, that'd be a lot.
Yeah. Well, thanks for humoring us and going through and getting to know you a little bit. Let's move on to what we've been playing recently. And since you are the guest, Lethus, why don't you go first and tell us what you've been playing recently?
After opening up and playing X-23 a couple times, I actually felt the need to go back and try out Psylocke again. I had a really hard time with Psylocke when I first opened her up. She felt really restricted, defensively really weak, and just it wasn't clicking. But something about X-23 and using her claws in my mind sort of snapped back to Psylocke for some reason, and it's like I went back and started playing her. I was like, okay, now I'm starting to get it, and now I'm getting some ideas for deck building and how to make her tick, and that's been a lot of fun. Just re-examining her and figuring out her kit and how to kind of make her sing.
What's your favorite aspect or go to with Psylocke?
Still justice.
I will admit, I have not played Psylocke yet.
I've
Yeah.
actually also been wanting to play Psylocke. Like of the X-Men X-Force waves, I'm not a huge fan of the X-Men X-Force, but Psylocke, X-23, like those are probably the ones I'm excited for. But yeah, Psylocke I haven't played either, so I'm interested to hear what your take is on it.
Yeah. I generally, I, I don't know what my thing is. I get the new heroes when they come out. Sleeve them, I open them up, and I, put all their deck building cards away. But I generally let them sit for a while, and then I kind of go to them once they're not the newest ones anymore. I think it has to do with I consume, I don't know what I would consider like a above average amount of media about this game. Not all of it, certainly, but I feel like when someone comes out, that's what all the YouTube channels and all the podcasts are talking about. And I feel like I get enough exposure and it almost feels like too much. It's like I've heard about all the new ones all the time. That makes me not want to play them as much. And then when they're like not the flavor of the day, then I find myself going back to them more generally. I don't know what that says about me as a person, but let's not get too deep.
Contrarian.
Yeah, maybe. So I haven't actually played Psylocke. I've looked through the cards. There's just also some heroes that come out that just don't grab me, and Psylocke is one of those. And she may sit for a while, just like it doesn't appeal to me. So yeah, I'd love to hear why I should play Psylocke.
She is, and I think this is true of this entire wave, but particularly for her, she's very interesting to play. Like some heroes, the complexity is in kind of the deck building decisions, and then the decision making during play is not that complicated. Um, like what's a good example of that? I feel like Domino is kind of that way. Most of the time, I feel like playing her deck is not actually that complex, except for occasional jackpot shenanigans. But most turns with Psylocke are a little puzzle that you have to kind of figure out. Like, how am I going to use her blades? Am I going to use them for resources? I'm going to shuffle stuff back to the deck. How am I going to manage the flips of those blades to give her stat boosts and still get the effects I want of her events? Like, everything is kind of connected. And so most of your decisions influence something else that you want to do that turn.
Yeah, it's just when I was reading through, it just seems all the flipping of the weapons, it just seemed like a lot. And for whatever reason, it hasn't appealed to me. And there are still heroes that I haven't played in the game. Yeah. There's like some of them going way back. There's a list. It's not super long, but well, I'll just off the top of my head right now, I still haven't played Iron Man from the core set.
What?
Yeah, never played Iron Man. There's a couple others. I'd have to think about it.
I don't think you've ever played Vision before. I don't think you've ever touched him before.
No, I don't. He's not one that appeals to me much. No, I've played a lot of Vision.
I was gonna say you're not missing anything.
Wow. Okay. You're definitely not invited back. No, there's a few. I think Drax. I've not played Drax before.
Mm,
I've never played Ironheart.
really?
Psylocke. Yeah. So there's
That's
a few.
a surprising list.
I'm sure this is hard to believe, but I also have not played all the heroes, so
Yeah. Well, we know
same
you're
boat.
the new one. I don't know. I just have seen. So like Lazy Titan, who's not here this time with us, but he is probably the person I've played this the most with, and he's played a ton of Iron Man, and he's played a ton of Ironheart, and Drax is probably his favorite hero.
Mm,
So I've just seen them played so much in close quarters that it's almost like I've played them. So
I
I
gotcha.
know
I
about
follow.
them. Just I know their cards. I know how they work. I just haven't done it myself. I don't know.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think with those two heroes in particular, they always kind of set up the same. They kind of play the same. So once you see it once, and that's how it is all the time.
Is there someone you've not played, Lethus?
No, I've played everybody multiple times.
Really?
My least played hero is probably Vision. I think I've played him twice.
Oh my goodness.
Even compared to Hulk and Valkyrie?
Oh yeah, for sure. So the
Wow.
thing with Hulk and Valkyrie is that because they're I'm so sorry, because they're so bad, they're like a puzzle that I keep trying to come back to and see if I can somehow make them work with the new card pool. And it's not gone terribly well.
No.
That's
No,
the fun part with Hulk, I think. You know what? I think I'm gonna build a pool aspect Hulk. I'll get back to you guys on how well
Okay.
that works.
I'm gonna hold you to that. Next episode, I want to hear about your Hulk pool deck.
You should do it in a 4-player game so the rest of the table just
Oh boy.
absolutely hates you.
Yes.
Yeah. I think, I mean Vision is my favorite, as I've said in the podcast before, but I think he threads that needle of like not being bad and not being great. And I think people just kind of forget about him. So he's not Valkyrie, which is just like, okay, everyone knows Valkyrie's terrible. So like you said, it's a puzzle to try. And it's not Doctor Strange, who everyone knows is amazing. I don't
Right.
know. Anyway, enough about Vision. Keiko, what have you been playing recently?
So kind of touched on this a little bit. So yeah, I finally got around to Deadpool. I mentioned before a couple episodes ago that I wasn't really excited for him. I was when he was announced, right? The internet was all over him, and I was too. But then once I started reading the cards, once I had them in my hand, I was like, I don't know about this. I don't know about Deadpool. I don't know about the pool aspect. But I got around to him, right? I played X-23. That was exciting. I agree with you, Lethis, that she was really fun to play. She was kind of what I hoped Wolverine was. So I was like, all right, let me try out Deadpool. Like I said, I was going to try him when he was announced, and it actually went pretty well. Of course, I played his pre-con, right? He's built with the pool aspect, and I think it was fairly balanced for what it was. I think it was a good intro. I think overall to the pool aspect.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah, his whole thing, Deadpool's whole gimmick is that he can't die in hero form. When he does, quote unquote, he just resets his dial to 1, and it adds an acceleration token to the main scheme. And he kind of gets stronger based on how many acceleration tokens there are. He has one card, it's called It Ain't Over. It increases the threat threshold by 2 for each acceleration token, which we kind of talked about before. The balance of players, I think it works really well with solo. You're able to manage that. You can, but with multiple players, there's more risk for that threat to add on. So, and then we mentioned before also that he can die in alter ego, which I did almost run into. I was fighting Crossbones, and of course, in phase 2, he gets the machine gun.
Oh yeah.
So I did quote unquote die from his main attack, flipped over because you have to flip to alter ego with 1 health, and then his machine gun with indirect damage comes through. Luckily, I was really lucky. I got nothing, but I did realize in that moment, like, oh, I can lose by dying.
But can you still take that indirect damage when you're an alter ego?
I think when you're an alter ego, right, you still take the indirect damage because it's not an attack,
You
right? It's
would, but
just
I think your sequencing might be backwards. The machine gun's actually an interrupt, so the machine gun shot
It
takes its
happens
place
first.
before the attack.
ooh. I made a similar mistake with X-23, just kind of playing on it, but it still came to the realization that you can die in alter ego.
Yeah, it's possible. Green Goblin and that ICU card, the treachery that makes him attack you even if you're an alter ego.
Oh yeah.
Oh yes,
That one is rough. I think it's important to like tell people that like I still make mistakes too. And like there's a lot of things to track, a lot of interrupts and responses and action windows, and I'm sure I don't get through most games without making a mistake. So it's fine, Keiko.
yep. And so I do have a couple more points I want to make. So
Go.
these are like pool aspect cards, but it's in his pre-con, so I'm going to include it. But they're resource cards, right? It's self-control, self-confidence, and self-preservation.
Mm-hmm.
And they basically, if you sustain less than 5 damage, they're double resource. No damage, they're triple resource.
Oh
So
wow.
those are really nice to get off the start, which I also got really lucky and did. But I did have one question, which having the two of you guys on, maybe you'll be able to answer that for me. One of his signature cards is called Armed to the Teeth,
Yeah.
where you basically get to look for any weapon in your entire collection,
Mm-hmm.
place it face down with Armed to the Teeth.
Yeah.
And if you have a weapon card already in play, you can swap them. But my question was, if I use that weapon card, it's exhausted, right? And I swap that with the weapon that's attached armed to the teeth. Does that new weapon, also have to be exhausted, or does that come in fresh?
I don't think it enters play exhausted. Maybe Lethus knows.
I want to check, but I think it would come in fresh. Like nothing enters play exhausted unless an effect says that it does.
Got
Yeah.
it. Okay. All right. I just
To my
wanted that
knowledge.
specification. But no, Deadpool was actually all right. Maybe it helped that I had that new low expectation, so he could only go higher, you know. But no, he was actually fun to use, and pretty manageable despite the acceleration tokens. But that was solo. I don't know how it'll go for more players.
Coming from a man who just said in 4 years or more he's not played Iron Man, I can confidently say if there is a single hero that I will probably never play, it's Deadpool. I I don't care about the character. Like I think the Deadpool joke kind of wore thin. The first movie was like funny, I guess, but it just gets to me the whole like shtick gets really tiresome and kind of tedious. I didn't think Spider Ham was particularly funny. Like it was kind of cute to read through all the things you're supposed to say or whatever, and high fiving everybody, and it was like kind of funny. Deadpool's whole thing is just kind of annoying, in my opinion, and I just don't see myself ever touching Deadpool. I'll be honest.
I'm kind of there with you. Like there's definitely a part of me that sort of wishes Spider-Ham and Deadpool didn't exist in this
Yeah,
game. But I will say, like I thought Spider-Ham did a pretty good job of embodying the fantasy, like playing that cartoon physics card and just this
yeah,
kind of silliness of getting slammed for 8 and just not caring and like bouncing back like your Wile E. Coyote
yeah.
is enjoyable. And if you can kind of embrace the silliness of Deadpool, they actually do a good job of representing the theme of Deadpool in the game. Like it almost feels like he's just making fun of all the rules. all the things that should be hurting you, you kind of don't care. You take ridiculous risks. You let the villain try to kill you, throw yourself into everything without caring about your own well-being. And you just sort of laugh the whole way through. And that does feel like Deadpool.
Which also kind of matched my playstyle. And same thing with X-23. I like to just throw myself into danger. I like to get punched in the face and then also return that punching in the face.
Yeah.
So those two heroes worked really well for me, especially the fact that in hero form, like I can never die. Like I can always just throw myself into the road, and that's always fun.
Leithas, have you played Deadpool?
Yeah, a few times. I think probably 6 games by now.
And are you a fan? Do you like it or eh?
He's not really my style. I feel like the best strategies for him are super gimmicky in ways
Yeah.
that I don't like. They're effective. I'm not going to dispute that, but I don't like that level of gimmickiness. And I am a more defensive, like drawn out player, and so incurring all those extra acceleration tokens is not a thing I want to do. It's so terrifying for me.
Yeah. Deadpool. Maybe we'll talk about Deadpool at some point. I'm kind of not super inclined to do so, as I already mentioned.
Yeah, I'm still on the fence about him. He just turned out better than what I thought, but I'd want to play around with him more. But yeah, the acceleration icon, really, and all the icons he kind of incurs. So I don't know, just a lot of playing around to see how that manages.
I'll go next. I have been returning to an old classic favorite of mine. I've been playing a lot of Captain America recently.
Ooh.
Captain America is, for a long time, he was my favorite hero to play. And I played a lot of him early on. And I still go back to him. He's kind of like that warm blanket that you need when you just like don't want anything else. He's fairly straightforward. It's not super complicated. It doesn't take a ton of brain space. But when I just want to like play a few games and it's been a long day at work or I'm traveling or whatever, he's a really nice one to pull out. So I've been playing him. I've been building some thematic shield decks that are like certainly could be better, but I've been playing Justice, which I don't play a ton of. I don't like Justice all that much, but if you want to play shield decks, that's kind of what you have right now. So I've just been trying to play that and just kind of play thematic like shield with the shield allies and shield stuff to play on that with Cap, and it's nice. It's like comfort food, when you've like had enough of everything else and you don't want to kill your brain with some of the other heroes that get more complicated. I always find myself returning to Cap and having a good time. He's obviously really strong. He's really good, but I don't think he's like crazy overpowered. It's not like playing Doctor Strange. So yeah, that's what I've been playing recently. Like not a ton to say. I think I've said a lot about Cap over the years or over the episodes of this podcast, but yeah, he's definitely still in my top 5 favorites to go back to.
And I kind of hope that they go back to heroes that aren't super gimmicky, that aren't super, difficult, that have that learning curve. They just kind of go back to that straightforwardness. I don't know if it's because at this point they feel like they have to keep increasing those expectations, but I kind of miss having those straightforward heroes that you could just kind of play by turning off your brain somewhat.
Yeah, I do. I definitely feel like there's definitely like it's just trending up in terms of complexity of the heroes that they're bringing out. And maybe that's just because the game's been around for a few years. I don't know, how far that line extends. Like you, Keiko, I think I wouldn't mind to have a few in the next wave, or maybe a wave that's just like a little less complicated. I think reading through Psylocke, as I said, I've not played Psylocke, but reading through the cards and looking at it, familiarizing myself with her content, I feel like that's kind of as complicated as I want Marvel Champions to be. And I definitely think if we keep going, it could reach a point where I feel like it's more than I want from this game. I don't mind a heavy game, but I don't think I want Marvel Champions to be a real brain burner. That's just my opinion. So I don't know. It's good that we have those heroes to return to, but I wouldn't mind having some that are a little more not easy or simple, but just like straightforward with not too many moving parts.
Yeah, just a couple here and there.
I think the last one that probably fits that bill that's been released is Wolverine. Wolverine is pretty straightforward,
Yeah.
um, but there hasn't been any this wave. This wave has been definitely more complex.
Yeah, across the board, and I wonder if that's going to continue. Um, but yeah, I think this wave stands out actually in terms of complexity. Now we have our question of the episode. Actually, before I go to the question of the episode, let me ask you, Lethus, do you have a comfort food hero that you go back to that just warms you from the inside?
Probably Peter Parker.
Hmm.
Like he's not really complex. He feels very safe. Like he's got those good events that with the enhanced spider sense, he gets the free cards when he gets attacked, he gets the backflips. Uh he's pretty easy to play, and because he's so defensively strong, to some extent it feels like he can kind of do whatever you want in his deck and it's gonna be fine.
Yeah.
It depends a bit on the scenario, but yeah, it always just feels good to be like start the game and round one you're getting attacked. It's like, oh, I just get a card and backflip. That's cool.
Yeah.
And then
I
counterattack with swing kick.
Yeah,
Yeah.
swing and web kick. I definitely feel like he's kind of patient zero of the game a lot. That's how I think of him. Is like he has swing and web kick, which is like kind of the attack card that I think a lot of them are still measured against, and he has backflip, which is like the defense card that they're all kind of compared to. He's draws extra cards when he's attacked. He's got a good defense stat. Like he's pretty kind of he set the benchmark in a number of different ways. Aunt May is amazing at healing. Like he just has a lot of really good stuff, and he also matches up really well against the first villain, like Rhino, right?
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so I just always think of him as like that's where you start. Because the other ones in the core set I feel like are a little more mechanically interesting. He isn't. He's not super interesting. I still like playing him too, but he's not. I don't know. I feel like the other ones do something that he doesn't do. Keiko, who's your comfort hero? Don't say Hulk.
Well, then it's
If you say
nobody.
Hulk, I'm muting your microphone.
Yeah, whenever I'm frustrated, Hulk is my go-to. Like I just slap him on the table, and if my day's ruined, everybody's day is ruined, you know? So
Yeah,
that's what brings me the comfort.
you're ridiculous. All right, I'm cutting your feed from here on out. Anyway, now we'll move on to the question of the episode. Thanks for going through a few extra questions with me. The question we got from a listener is this: what hero has the biggest power discrepancy between solo and multiplayer? And
Oh.
I'll expand that a little bit. We can even, if you want to take it in a fun direction, like who's more fun in one versus the other. But the question was about power. So, Keiko, why don't you kick us off? What hero do you think has the biggest discrepancy?
This is actually super interesting because I touched on this a little bit already. I do want to point out I haven't played a lot of heroes. Again, hard to believe. But having mentioned Deadpool before, his whole gimmick with adding acceleration tokens. Again, I'll point out specifically his "It Ain't Over" card adds 2 to the threshold for every acceleration token on the main scheme, which for solo is a lot, right? That's easy to manage. You can somewhat kind of not even care about the scheme when it adds 2 each time. But when it's still only adding 2, regardless of how many extra players are there, that's when I was kind of questioning how Deadpool would play with more than 2 players, or more than 1 player rather. So I think I'll stick with Deadpool in that.
Yeah, I can't speak either way because I haven't played him. But I think that's a good shout. I mean, in theory, having seen him played, I think that could hold up. Plus, also his gimmick of that 2 card sequence of this card is fire and whatever the other one is. You just take a bunch of damage and deal a bunch of damage. You know, villains and a 1 player have a certain amount of health, and villains at 4 player just have 4 times that. So that card is just less effective, right? That
Yep.
little
And again,
sequence.
his precon and the new pool aspect, it kind of messes with all the icons. So,
Mhm.
how one person can handle that versus 2 versus 3, like it's different for every player count. So, I am kind of curious about that for Deadpool. That's who I'm going with.
Okay. I'll go next. For me, I think I'm going to say Cable. I think Cable is much, much stronger as a multiplayer hero. I think the way he can support the board and kind of spread things out makes him insane. like giving everybody, with build support, being able to choose that, being able to choose which of the side schemes he starts with, and then being able to put all the player side schemes into his deck makes him a crazy, crazy good support hero. I'm not the first person to say that or think of that. And I think in solo, he can struggle. I think he struggles in certain aspects. I think he's good in justice. He's not good in some of the other just aspects. For example, protection. I think he struggles. Late game, he can be really good. He's got those big thwarting and attack events once he gets all things in the victory display. But playing him solo, the first couple rounds, it can be shaky for him. So I'm going to say Cable. Lethus?
I'm gonna go with Nova. In a 4-player game where the table is littered with side schemes and minions, his ability to just knock down one thing after another with Unleash Nova Force is absolutely insane. We had a 4-player game recently, and every card Nova took off the table, I set in a pile, and at the end, we had half the villains encounter deck on the table.
Yeah.
Just Nova knocked it all out in one go. Absolutely bonkers.
It feels so thematic, right? Like he has those huge, explosive, like Nova power turns, right? He just goes supernova and he just like goes wild and clears the entire board while everyone kind of twiddles their thumbs and watches. And then he cools off. Like, but he can do it all. He's like, no, leave that side scheme, leave that minion. I got it. And he just readies and does it over and over and over again. No, I think that's a
Yeah.
good shout.
It was like a 15-minute turn, but
Yeah. Go grab a soda, go to the bathroom, do whatever you gotta do.
Go on your phone like everyone else.
Yeah. We can no longer delay the inevitable. It's time to talk about the card of the day. Lethus and I have a long history with this card, which I will not go into great detail about, but suffice it to say, it is core to our relationship. The card today, if you clicked on the episode, you already know it. It's Red Dagger, the 3-cost ally. And Lethus, since you're here as a guest, would you mind reading the card for us?
so like you said, Red Dagger is a 3-cost ally, 2 thwart, 2 attack, and 3 hit points. He has the champion trait, and his interrupt ability is when Red Dagger is defeated, spend 2 resources of different types to deal 2 damage to an enemy and return Red Dagger to your hand. Flavor text says, Karachi is my home. I patrol these neighborhoods.
And he is a lightning resource if you want to spend him, if it comes to that. The first thing we always talk about is the art. So let's start there and talk about Red Dagger's art because we're going to spend a lot of time, I think, talking about his interrupt in a few minutes. So let's get the art out of the way. I'll start with the little face in the corner. That's like one of my things that I always zero in on. And the Miss Marvel one is terrible.
Even with a mask too, it's kind of
Yeah.
funny. That's like your kind of savior in that.
I don't like it. Usually the faces aren't great. Masks help. I think this is terrible. I think it's ugly. It looks really weird. I don't like it at all. So that's my contribution. What do you guys think about the main picture?
So real quick, again, we
Yep.
always like to point out there's an artist credit here, Javier Pina.
Thank you.
If I'm pronouncing that right, yes. And usually it's our belief that that means that that's a custom art. So that's what we're sticking with here. Again, if anybody would like to specify, please let us know.
Yeah, or if you are Javier Pena, please contact us. Let us know. Lethus, what do you think about this art?
Uh, I'm not actually super familiar with this character. I like the art style. I like that he has the red scarf and the dagger to pretty clearly let you know why he has the name. And I like the way the scarf kind of goes up out of the frame off to the
Yeah.
right. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is one of the more dynamic poses with everything that's going on, going into the text box rather.
Yep. Kind of covers that text shield. And I do like, her color scheme, Miss Marvel's signature cards, the blue and red with that yellow stripe. I think that's really striking. That looks really good.
Yeah.
So that kind of graphic design is good. The pose, I watched the TV show, which had Red Dagger in it. Like Letha said, he has a bright red scarf and a dagger. So if you were confused about who you're fighting, here he is. I don't know what the rest of his outfit is. It's like
Yeah, it's
kind of
like
a
what
Robin
Shrek
Hood
wore. Yeah.
outfit. I don't know. I don't know. He's got like a bandana, maybe. I can't quite tell what he's wearing. He's got gray and green combination with a little belt. but he's like running or charging kind of towards the viewer. It, like you said, it is dynamic. It's like it's got some movement in there, but it doesn't do a lot for me.
I actually really like this pose because it's dynamic. I know I've been kind of teasing it a lot, but no, I think it's actually pretty engaging, and I do like the scarf. It is the color that pops off from the rest of it, and your
Mhm.
eye kind of follows it back to the name Red Dagger at the top. Like I like that a lot. My one thing I guess I'll point out is that his back arm might be a little off. It kind of looks longer than it should be, but I think it helps that it's cut off by the text box. But
Mm.
I think that'd be my only kind of nitpick.
Do we know what powers he has? Does he have like stretchy powers or anything?
He's got a dagger.
I don't think he has powers, but I don't definitively know that.
Okay, he might just be a dude. I don't know. If you know, email us winninghandpodcast@gmail. Leave a comment on the YouTube or the Instagram or whatever. Let us know. I don't actually know. Okay, well, we're gonna have trouble with the next bit then, which is theme. Does this feel like Red Dagger? I don't really know what Red Dagger should feel like, but assuming he's just a guy with a knife, does this card embody that guy?
I mean, I guess sort of looking at him, he's supposed to come off as sort of like an assassin type, right? Because usually when a character has a dagger, they're kind of like that sneaky, swift character, right?
Yeah.
And the way that scarf comes off of him, I think is supposed to like flow in the wind type deal. Like I could see him as a character that runs, hides out of sight, you know. So I guess maybe that's what the theme is when he's defeated, you can kind of do a swift strike and then he just ends up back in your hand, like back into hiding or something. Maybe that's what I'm getting from this. Like I don't know anything about Red Dagger either.
I'm kind of getting Electra vibes from him, to be honest. Like the whole face kind of reminds me of Electra, and the assassin, like you said, kind of brings that out
Yeah.
too. So yeah, maybe it's like when you think he's dead, like reaches out with his dagger and stabs you.
One thing that works really well with this card, taking the image and the flavor text together, as the flavor text implies, very committed to defending Karachi from evildoers. And whether he has powers or not, he is very willing to charge into danger, face the threats head on, take on whatever's in the way. And I like how those two go together here.
Yeah, and I mean, in terms of like the power of this card, here's where I think we're really gonna spend some time talking. So the power of this card, he does have 2 attack and 2 thwart with only 1 consequential each. That's good. And 3 hit points. Those are all solid. He's got the champion trait, which doesn't super matter for allies, but it could. But that interrupt. So you spend 3 on him, and then when he would die, you spend 2 more resources on him of different types to deal 2 damage and put him back in your hand. I just don't think this is a very powerful card.
So because it's not forced interrupt, is it still a choice? Is that it, like do you have to do that? Like is that the response that
You do not
happens?
have to. No.
Okay. I don't know. Because resources are so precious to spend 2 of them and they have to be different types too, which might be difficult, right, depending on what you've played already. Just for it to go back into your hand. Right? I mean, I guess it's nice it deals 2 more damage in death, but to not even like go back on the board, I don't know. I don't know.
Y'all are hurting me here.
I know we have a difference of opinion on this card,
Yeah,
so
I'm kind of neutral in it. Like I'm just trying to piece it together. Right? I know nothing about this feud, this Romeo and Juliet story that you
this is a
guys got
blood
going on.
feud.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like Red Dagger. I think he's very strong. The part that I think you really need to take into account when evaluating him is not to just look at the numbers printed on the card. It's to understand that it is played in a Miss Marvel deck. There are other characters who would not love this card nearly as much, but Miss Marvel has so many resources available to her all of the time, as long as she's flipping down to Alter Ego, that I think she can make really, really strong use of him. And for that interrupt, part of why I think that's so important to her is that Miss Marvel is an event based hero. Most of her strength comes from playing attack and thwart events, and you don't always get the one you want when you need it. Red Dagger, a character that has the 2 thwart and 2 attack, can flex into whatever role you kind of need him to be at the moment, regardless of what you draw into your hand. and so he kind of fixes a potential hole in Miss Marvel's strategy.
Okay, so counterpoint. As an event-based hero, right? I would like him to interact with events in some kind of way. So, for example, the Miss Marvel ally that comes with Nova, who we talked about earlier, interacts with events in a way to put them back in Nova's hand. So I would prefer Red Dagger interacted in some way with what she's already trying to do, which is events. Either put them back in your hand or find an event or stash one, kind of like Bruno Cabelli does for her. That's what I would like. I see what you're saying. If you don't find the event that you want, you can use Red Dagger. I would just rather he helped you find an event instead. Like if you played him and you could search X number of cards to, of your deck to see if you find an event or something like that.
That makes sense. I don't want to say it doesn't make sense. Her supports do that already, and they don't fight. They help keep Miss Marvel in the fight and keep her motivated and keep her morale up. Red Dagger is in the fight himself. I think it makes sense that he doesn't have an ability that supports her because he doesn't have that power. He's his own
Mm,
entity.
mhm.
Um, and the rest of Miss Marvel's kit, in the form of the supports and her alter ego ability, kind of fill that role already.
Off the top of my
Um,
head, and correct me if I'm wrong, there are two other allies that return to your hand in the game. And if there's another one, please remind me. But it's Nightcrawler and Mockingbird, the signature ally Mockingbird. Is there another one that or I don't
I
think
don't know
so.
off the top of my head.
So Nightcrawler and Mockingbird essentially do the same thing. Was when you would take damage, I think for Nightcrawler, it's when an X-Men character would take damage. But that's basically the same thing. When Mockingbird when you would take damage as Hawkeye, you spend a resource of any type and put Mockingbird back in your hand to prevent all that damage. That Mockingbird is, in my opinion, head and shoulders above this ally.
We did an earlier episode with Captain Marvel, and I'm kind of seeing the similarities there, right? She was 4 cost,
Yep.
but Red Dagger's 3 cost. The two of them were 2 thwart, 2 attack, 1 consequential, and 3 health,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that on its own, Red Dagger has that step up. But Captain Marvel lets you draw a card based on the basic attacks, and then obviously Red Dagger has this interrupt. So that's kind of where I mean, I can see the use in it, especially since Lethus, you pointed out that this is a Ms. Marvel signature card or signature ally rather. So that does kind of boost the potential there.
So Mockingbird and Red Dagger are a natural comparison to me because they both are signature allies that go back into your hand. Hawkeye and Miss Marvel aren't terribly dissimilar. I think they're both event-based heroes.
Really?
Well, Hawkeye's events are his arrows, whereas Miss Marvel has more kind of leeway with what events they are, but they're essentially, the way I see them, both event based heroes. So Mockingbird, I think, shores up Hawkeye's biggest weakness, which is he just can't defend and easily gets overrun. So Mockingbird is awesome to have because she's going to help prevent some of that damage. Now, Miss Marvel is much stronger of a hero than Hawkeye is, but I feel like Red Dagger is just much weaker of a signature ally.
Quick tangent for Hawkeye. So the Hawkeye Mockingbird relationship is actually really well represented there. So in the comics, Hawkeye is kind of reckless, right? Like he almost has no business doing what he's doing. It's insane. He gets hurt all the time. And Hawkeye and Mockingbird had been married for a while and they eventually split up. But part of the problem that they have in their relationship is that Mockingbird is always trying to smooth over the jams that Hawkeye is getting into. Like she keeps him safe. He's a pain in her butt. He's very annoying to her and very frustrating. And I like that kind of comes across in the way they represent the mechanics where yeah, Hawkeye is getting in trouble and he might die, but oh, Bobby's going to save him one more time. And he kind of relies on her to bail him out over and over again,
Okay.
which, got to be really frustrating for her. But mechanically, it's fantastic. I also think that Hawkeye relies on Mockingbird much more than Miss Marvel relies on Red Dagger. Red Dagger is useful, but he's not a card that she is digging for turn one and needs to play as soon as possible.
No.
Hawkeye does kind of require Mockingbird unless his deck makes up for it in some way, because he just doesn't have the ability to protect himself very well.
Well, let me ask you this, Lethus. Is Red Dagger the worst card that she has in her kit?
I think this is a playstyle question. Like, my inclination for worst card in her kit is Bruno, but I can definitely see how other people might really value that one.
I quite like Bruno,
There's
but
like I don't like getting too thinky in my play, but other people who do like setting up long-term plans using Bruno and the way Amir can tuck cards on the bottom of your deck,
mhm.
you can set up this ridiculously killer explosive turn on when you draw into the last cards of your deck. I don't think that hard.
Yeah, same.
Amir is awesome. I think Bruno is the weakest of his supports, but I do like Bruno. But I think Red Dagger might be her worst card. I mean, her events have aged badly, right? Sneak by and Big Hands or whatever it is. I think there's stronger cards now, right? Um,
This gets to the other part of what I was going to say, where if you're comparing Hawkeye and Miss Marvel, they are both event based heroes. But Hawkeye only really cares about his own events. He has this very self-contained
right.
economy for what he does, and he can't really add anything to it. The thing that makes Miss Marvel so special is her ability to take advantage of aspected attacks and thwart events.
Yes.
Like early on, playing Miss Marvel with melee was a really exciting thing to do. Miss Marvel in multitasking is still an incredibly strong play. Spend one resource and a card to remove 8 threat is bonkers.
And then combine it with Overwatch, but gone.
Yeah, Overwatch is great. But yeah, I think I don't know that I'd say I feel like weak worst card in her kit if it's not Bruno, my next vote would probably be Sneak By. Like a 2 cost thwart that removes 3 threat is kind of I want to say baseline, but For Justice even beats that. And that's kind of your standard thwart event. Sneak By is not an impressive card on its own. It's just the reliable way that Miss Marvel gets to thwart. But almost all the thwarting cards are stronger than that one.
Yeah, that's a yeah, again, like I said a minute, I think her events have just aged badly as the power has gone up in the game. Those cards just aren't great. I mean, even when she came out, they relied on her boosting it, right, with her
Hmm.
ability. And at this point, even that doesn't feel great anymore. Like you said, for justice and multitasking are just better options if you're removing threat.
And maybe that's kind of where Red Dagger jumps in, is because Ms. Marvel is so reliant on events, her base stat line is so awful. Red Dagger kind of fills in for that kind of base move set, right? He's got 2 thwart, 2 attack. So he just kind of fills in for that, I guess. He's just kind of the muscle to Ms. Marvel. And compared to Bruno, he's like jumping rooftops. So
Yeah. But the fact you have to spend 2 resources of different types, so you can't even like drop a double. I can't drop genius or strength, is an unnecessary complication here.
I'd agree with that. Yeah. If it was, because if I could use a double resource, then I think it'd be a little bit better. But the fact that I have to look for 2 different ones, I think kind of
And
hurts.
you can't use her resource generator, her suit, right? Because that only works for events. So if you haven't used that this turn, you can't use that. I don't know. How fun is Red Dagger to play? Lethus, I think you like Red Dagger more than me. I'll let you start.
Oh, yeah, I think he's a blast. Like, you can set up crazy turns with him as well. If your turn is starting and Red Dagger has 2 damage on him already, you can use him to attack or thwart, bounce it back to hand, play him again, and then attack or thwart with him again. So that's up to 4 points of thwarting or damage from his activations, then the 2 damage from his ability. And that's really reliable. It's not going to be the strongest. You want to play her events first most of the time. But when you don't have a thwart event and you need thwarting, he can do that for you really quickly. He's also a very reliable card to play on the turn that you start in hero form and flip down to alter ego. Because if you play out a bunch of events when you're in hero form, and then you don't have enough resources or don't have the right events to play anymore, and you flip down, you have Red Dagger available to you. You can now take advantage of all of the Miss Marvel supports and alter ego ability when you flip down. If you use Amir and Nakia and her ability Teen Spirit, that essentially gets you 3 resources that are only available in Alter Ego after you've flipped down and can't play any more hero events. And that's enough to replay Red Dagger and just set up for another future turn where you might need him. He can also block for her in a pinch.
Yeah, boy, this is where we differ. I don't find Red Dagger that fun, and 90% of the time or more, he's just spent as a resource, and I wish he wasn't in her deck.
Ugh.
I just like the situation you described, right, where he thwarts and then dies and goes back in your hand and plays him again to thwart again. He he died, but you spent 2 resources of different types, and then to play him again would require the rest of your hand. You played your entire hand to thwart for 4. And I guess if you draw a hand that's dead, right? If you have, I don't know, wiggle room and you didn't need to defend and you have some other cards that just aren't doing anything for you, then maybe. But why don't you just play sneak by if you have, I don't know, like,
Well, that's what I'm saying is though you don't need to use other cards to play him. Like you do need the 2 resources to bounce him, but you don't need those resources to play him because when you flip down, you just take advantage of all the resources you weren't going to have another use for anyway.
yeah, because you can do Teen Spirit and draw a card and you can use Nakia to play one cheaper, right?
Yep, and Amir lets you draw a card as
Oh,
well.
Amir lets you
So like
draw,
you
right?
get 3 resources in Alter Ego.
Okay. In that instance, I think you're right. Like if you flip down and you have them in your hand, then you have those 3 free resources you can use. But outside of that, like if you're drawing that many cards with things you don't want to play, I think you should be looking at your deck construction rather than like using Red Dagger as an escape valve. You know what I mean?
Well, but what other events are you going to put into your deck that you can play in Alter Ego?
No, I agree with you. Like if you're an alter ego, yes, the math you laid out is true. Like you play those 3. But I think outside of that, like in hero form, you're not gonna play Red Dagger. You're gonna play one of your events. Or a better ally. I mean, like, let's just say it.
And I do have a quick question. So it says when he's defeated, you get to do everything. Is that just with attacks, or does that count with consequential damage too?
Defeated is defeated. So yeah, however. Keiko, how fun is Red Dagger? You're the middle guy here.
Yeah, and I think I'm still kind of teetering on that. Like again, running it down, right? 3 cost, but 2 thwart, 2 attack, 1 consequential, 3 health. It's like, oh man, yeah. But the ability,
Get off the fence, Keiko.
yeah, I'm going like back and forth with you guys, but I'm like on an electric fence,
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's hard. I think I'm gonna give it a 7. Like it gets the high score going down that line, and then it gets the ability. You kind of have to think about it. You have to weigh decisions based on timing, how you built your deck, right? The resources you have.
Is that your final score? Did you just jump into final scores, Keiko?
I did because I'm the real guest here.
Okay. We're moving to final score. Keiko gave it a 7. I will give Lethis the last word because I like to end on a positive note. I'm going to give Red Dagger like a 3. I just do not think Red Dagger is good. I think is a card I never play. When it enters my hand, I always wish it was a different card. There are edge cases, as we talked about, where you might play him. Like if you flip down to Alter Ego with only him in your hand, then you can use the 3 resources if you have all your supports out to play him. Yes, in that case, I think you should do that. Other than that, you should find a way to spend him for something useful, in my opinion. 3 out of 10, not a card I look to play.
But you know what? Together we make 10 because that's how averages work.
That's how averages work.
I will say just one quick note before
Yeah,
Lethus jumps in. I guess in a sense, using the ability, it is like a nice, reliable way to get an ally back into your hand.
yeah,
Because sometimes you might be wishing for an ally, right? I guess it's nice that you defend, Red Dagger's defeated, and then you, I guess, have him as an ally again in your hand in case you want that comfort of another ally. So maybe that's another note to have in there.
all right. Lethus, tell the people why they should care about Red Dagger.
I'm gonna rate him at an 8.
Oh,
Um,
man.
again, I think he's really good. Like part of the evaluation, a large part of the evaluation is that he is in Miss Marvel's kit.
Mhm.
Where yes, Miss Marvel does want to prioritize events with all the resources she has access to in Alter Ego. The fact that she needs to get her upgrades in play before her events really shine. Red Dagger is more useful at that point. Those instances where you draw multiple attacks, and so you use one and you use Embiggen on it, but then your second event doesn't get that bonus. So playing Red Dagger is actually more damage efficient at that point, a lot of times. He's just so versatile in a character who otherwise would feel very draw dependent.
Mm.
And I love that he's this kind of constant outlet for her that's versatile and does whatever she needs done at that moment. Yeah, I think he's a lot of fun and has different roles early game versus late game. And Oh, he's great. He's great.
Well, as we said earlier on, as a foundational piece of our relationship, it's amazing that we're still friends because Red Dagger divides us every time. I remember the first time I met you at the game group, and we were sitting there having a nice, normal game of Marvel Champions, and you said something crazy like how good Red Dagger was, and I didn't know how to take you seriously. And I feel like we've had a lot of witty repartee since then about many different cards. Our opinions tend to be quite different, but Red Dagger's. You're not going to convince me about Red Dagger.
You can't even get through the line with a straight face.
Red Dagger is trash. It is a card, and it is one you could play. So that's kind of our final scores about Red Dagger. Let us know what you think, dear listener. Leave us a review. Did you like having Leithus on the podcast? Leave a 5-star review and tell us why he convinced you that Red Dagger was good. I don't know if he did. Anyway, that's all for us today at the Winning Hand Podcast. And I will say goodbye from me, Boomguy, and from Keiko, and from Leithus. And we will see you next time. Thanks for listening.
Hulk pool aspect.
I'm going to go cry myself to sleep.